Chapter 10 of Anne Veronica. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. Anne Veronica by H.G. Wells. Chapter the 10th. The Suffragettes. Part 1. "There is only one way out of all this," said Anne Veronica, sitting up in her little bed in the darkness and biting at her nails. "I thought I was just up against Morningside Park and father, but it's the whole order of things, the whole blessed order of things." She shivered. She frowned and gripped her hands about her knees very tightly. Her mind developed into savage wrath at the present conditions of a woman's life. "I suppose all life is an affair of chances, but a woman's life is all chance. It's artificially chance. Find your man, that's the rule. All the rest is humbug and delicacy. He's the handle of life for you. He will let you live if it pleases him. Can't it be altered?" "I suppose an actress is free." She tried to think of some altered state of affairs in which these monstrous limitations would be alleviated, in which women would stand on their own feet in equal citizenship with men. For a time she brooded on the ideals and suggestions of the Socialists, on the vague intimations of an endowment of motherhood, of a complete relaxation of that intense individual dependence for women which is woven into the existing social order. At the back of her mind there seemed always one irrelevant qualifying spectator whose presence she sought to disregard. She would not look at him, she would not think of him. When her mind wavered, then she muttered to herself in the darkness so as to keep hold of her generalizations. It is true. It is no good waving the thing. It is true. Unless women are never to be free, never to be even respected, there must be a generation of martyrs. Why shouldn't we be martyrs? There's nothing else for most of us anyhow. It's a sort of blacklegging to want to have a life of one's own. She repeated as if she answered an objector. A sort of blacklegging. A sex of blacklegging clients. Her mind diverged to other aspects and another type of womanhood. Poor little Miniver! What can she be but what she is? Because she states her case in a tangle, drags it through swamps of nonsense, it doesn't alter the fact that she is right. That phrase about dragging the truth through swamps of nonsense she remembered from Capes. At the recollection that it was his, she seemed to fall through a thin surface, as one might fall through the crust of a lava into glowing depths. She wallowed for a time in the thought of Capes, unable to escape from his image and the idea of his presence in her life. She let her mind run into dreams of that cloud paradise of an altered world in which the Goopes and Minivers, the Fabians and reforming people believed. Across that world was written in letters of light, endowment of motherhood. Suppose in some complex yet conceivable way women were endowed, were no longer economically and socially dependent on men. If one was free, she said, one could go to him. There's vile hovering to catch a man's eye. One could go to him and tell him one loved him. I want to love him. A little love from him would be enough. It would hurt no one. It would not burden him with any obligation. She groaned aloud and bowed her forehead to her knees. She floundered deep. She wanted to kiss his feet. His feet would have the firm texture of his hands. Then suddenly her spirit rose in revolt. "I will not have this slavery," she said. "I will not have this slavery." She shook her fist ceilingward. "Do you hear?" she said. "Whatever you are, wherever you are, I will not be slave to the thought of any man, slave to the customs of any time. Confound this slavery of sex. I am a man. I will get this under if I am killed in doing it." She scowled into the cold blacknesses about her. "Manning," she said, and contemplated a figure of inaggressive persistence. "No." Her thoughts had turned in a new direction. "It doesn't matter," she said, after a long interval, "if they are absurd. They mean something. They mean everything that women can mean, except submission. The vote is only the beginning, the necessary beginning. If we do not begin—" She had come to a resolution. Abruptly she got out of bed, and smoothed her sheet and straightened her pillow and lay down, and fell almost instantly asleep. Part 2. The next morning was as dark and foggy as if it was mid-November instead of early March. Ann Veronica woke rather later than usual, and lay awake for some minutes before she remembered a certain resolution she had taken in the small hours. Then instantly she got out of bed and proceeded to dress. She did not start for the Imperial College. She spent the morning up to 10 in writing a series of unsuccessful letters to Ramage, which she tore up unfinished. And finally she desisted and put on her jacket and went out into the lamp-lit obscurity and slimy streets. She turned a resolute face southward. She followed Oxford Street into Holborn, and there she inquired for Chancery Lane. There she sought and at last found 107A, one of those heterogeneous piles of offices which occupy the eastern side of the lane. She studied the painted names of firms and persons and enterprises on the wall, and discovered that the Women's Bond of Freedom occupied several contiguous suites on the first floor. She went upstairs and hesitated between 4 doors with ground glass panes, each of which professed the Women's Bond of Freedom in neat black letters. She opened one and found herself in a large untidy room set with chairs that were a little disarranged as if by an overnight meeting. On the walls were notice boards bearing clusters of newspaper slips, 3 or 4 big posters of monster meetings, one of which Ann Veronica had attended with Miss Miniver, and a series of announcements in purple copying ink, and in one corner was a pile of banners. There was no one at all in this room, but through the half-open door of one of the small apartments that gave upon it she had a glimpse of 2 very young girls sitting at a littered table and writing briskly. She walked across to this apartment and, opening the door a little wider, discovered a press section of the movement at work. "I want to inquire," said Ann Veronica. "Next door," said a spectacled young person of 17 or 18, with an impatient indication of the direction. In the adjacent apartment Ann Veronica found a middle-aged woman with a tired face under the tired hat she wore, sitting at a desk opening letters, while a dusky, untidy girl of 8 or 29 hammered industriously at a typewriter. The tired woman looked up in inquiring silence at Ann Veronica's diffident entry. "I want to know more about this movement," said Ann Veronica. "Are you with us?" said the tired woman. "I don't know," said Ann Veronica. "I think I am. I want very much to do something for women, but I want to know what you are doing." The tired woman sat still for a moment. "You haven't come here to make a lot of difficulties?" she asked. "No," said Ann Veronica, "but I want to know." The tired woman shut her eyes tightly for a moment, and then looked with them at Ann Veronica. "What can you do?" she asked. "Do?" "Are you prepared to do things for us? Distribute bills, write letters, interrupt meetings, canvass at elections, face dangers?" "If I am satisfied, if we satisfy you. Then, if possible, I would like to go to prison." "It isn't nice going to prison." "It would suit me." "It isn't nice getting there." "That's a question of detail," said Ann Veronica. The tired woman looked quietly at her. "What are your objections?" she said. "It isn't objections exactly. I want to know what you are doing, how you think this work of yours really does serve women." "We are working for the equal citizenship of men and women," said the tired woman. "Women have been and are treated as the inferiors of men. We want to make them their equals." "Yes," said Ann Veronica, "I agree to that, but—" The tired woman raised her eyebrows in mild protest. "Isn't the question more complicated than that?" said Ann Veronica. "You could have a talk to Miss Kitty Brett this afternoon if you liked. Shall I make an appointment for you?" Miss Kitty Brett was one of the most conspicuous leaders of the movement. Ann Veronica snatched at the opportunity, and spent most of the intervening time in the Assyrian Court of the British Museum, reading and thinking over a little book upon the feminist movement the tired woman had made her buy. She got a bun and some cocoa in the little refreshment room, and then wandered through the galleries upstairs,